Hi everyone and welcome. I am joined today by George Galloway, the man who needs no introduction. It's good to see you again, George.
And you, Professor, we keep meeting like this.
Well, as a British politician and a broadcaster, you've been a very vocal critic of the Western wars, but also the authoritarian developments and censorship, which is taking place across the West as well. Again, it's not a new idea that it's very difficult to maintain democracy under endless wars, as there's always a need to preserve political control and narrative control in the media. And as many are aware, you yourself was expelled from the UK Labour Party due to your very strong opposition to the invasion of Iraq. Now, of course, we have two big wars of the day, which is Ukraine and, well, if you can call what's happening in Gaza the genocide, the war. But how do you see the health at the moment of democracy across the West, especially in Europe? Do you see a democratic decline as well? And if so, what are the signs we should be looking at?
Well, you say especially across Europe, but it's actually a North American phenomenon also. We've seen people being picked up on the streets by a dozen or 2 dozen armed people for the crime of writing an op-ed in a university newspaper. We literally saw that. A judge recently freed the young woman, but it was a chilling reminder of the truth that the people who said they were in favour of free speech and against what they said was the liberal tyranny of free speech are no more keen on free speech or democracy for that matter now that they are in control, which is a useful reminder, I think, because sometimes, of course, we find ourselves in alignment with certain people, criticizing other people. But that doesn't mean the people we are in alignment with are necessarily any better than the people we are jointly criticizing. And I think you know what I mean about that. But you're right that Europe is the epicenter of the murder of democracy. That much is clear. When you can see the maneuvers in the dark and even in the light that were performed in Romania because of Romania's key place in the NATO battlefront against Russia, you see what they're prepared to do. They're unembarrassed, it would seem. If they are embarrassed, they didn't allow the embarrassment to stop them, to literally cancel elections because the wrong guy is on the way to winning, a guy who would not have allowed Romania to be a key component of the battle against Russia. So then a fallback guy comes on, and then he's winning out the park, and they rig the election in the 11th hour to the point that Grok described the outcome as having less than 1% credibility. That is to say that Simeon had 46% of the vote in the first ballot and didn't win, even though his opponent had less than half of his vote in the first ballot. Grok described that as less than 1% credibility. We've seen it in France, where the leading challenger to Macron, I'm sorry to say she's the leading challenger, but she was criminalized and put out the game, unable, not allowed to contest any further elections for the presidency of France. They hinted that they would do the same in Germany, and they might do the same in Germany. Here in Britain, so far, they have deployed less brutish tools and maneuvers, but they are employing tools, and they are ready to go further if necessary. If Nigel Farage, for example, another national populist leader, looked like he was going to be the next British Prime Minister, well, I'd be afraid of what would happen next. So the truth is, the liberal Western democracies are no more. They are in league with big tech, and where big tech doesn't get in bed with them, they bludgeon big tech to distort and algorithmically strangle any enemies of their project. The European Union is now in control of Europe, with its unelected leaders who weren't elected, cannot be removed, and are of extremely dubious parentage, if you get my meaning. The European Union is completely in control of events, certainly of all foreign policy events in Europe. That means national sovereignty means now nothing, and without national sovereignty, of course, you don't have democracy at all.
How do you see the issue of censorship? Because the European Union just, well, the EU Council as the executive branch just released this new sanction package. They call it a sanction package on Russia, but within this sanction package, you also see sanctions on their own citizens in the form of censorship. That is, Western journalists and bloggers, German citizens, journalists who are accused, again, in this sanction package, said that they're accused of legitimizing the Russian invasion, and also they're accused of delegitimizing the Ukrainian government. So again, they don't actually cite any laws why it would be a crime to question the legitimacy or delegitimize the Ukrainian government, but nonetheless, this is as a way of imposing, travel bans and seizing assets. Um, how do you read the? Do you see it's being stable, or is the censorship and infringement on rights, even with for EU citizens, in decline as well?
Well, in America, you can now delegitimize the American state, but you are not allowed to delegitimize the Israeli state. You will not be allowed into America if your social media has been critical of Israel, but you will be allowed in if it's been remorselessly critical of the United States. And what's now happening in Europe mirrors that. We have a situation where 3 European Union citizens are now banned from entering the European Union. We had a situation recently in Romania where Che Bose, a respected Irish journalist, a European Union citizen, was grabbed off the plane by Romanian security personnel and was deported from the country for criticisms that he had in the past made about Ukraine. So this is clearly a new departure. Once upon a time, you'll have your Norwegian equivalent, but ours was an Englishman's home is his castle. He can do and say what he likes in his own house, but that's no longer the case. The state has broached the walls of the castle and is now policing everything we say within it. And certain very prominent people in Britain, a former British ambassador, Craig Murray, was arrested at Edinburgh Airport. Another British citizen, Richard Medhurst, a well-known blogger, a young Christian man, was handcuffed and is still on bail, accused of being not just a supporter of Hamas, which he is not, but a member of Hamas, in fact, a member of the military wing of Hamas. This is a boy who is literally unqualified even to be in Hamas. He wears a cross around his neck, for God's sake. And others, Kit Clarenberg, respected journalist, arrested and handcuffed at Luton Airport. They are slowly making their way through the prominent critics of Western policy on Ukraine, but also on the genocide in Gaza. So all the things that we used to say, my father used to believe that we were a liberal Western democracy, but all the things that we used to claim made us liberal Western democracies are no longer in place.
Yeah, this argument is often made that at least during the Cold War, we had some more confidence. That is, we could allow the opponents, that is Moscow's arguments and perspectives from being heard. And the whole idea was we felt we had superior arguments, so we didn't shy away. But we're moving a bit away from this. And on the topic of narrative control, though, what is actually happening in at the moment in Gaza as opposed to what you read in the media?
Well, we now discover that the so-called humanitarian aid agency that was supposed to supervise the entry of aid into Gaza is in fact owned by the Israeli intelligence service Mossad. Grey Zone, Max Blumenthal's outstanding outfit, revealed that this morning. In any case, they're bringing in dried food, which is little use when you have no water. And they're bringing in a tiny amount of it, a tiny fraction of the food needs of more than 2 million people, indeed almost 2.25 million people, the vast majority of whom are 100%, according to the UN, 100% undernourished, malnourished, or actually starving. This is something that we've never seen before. We saw the consequences of it after the Red Army liberated the concentration camps, the death camps in the Second World War. We saw what a starving, famine-stricken, captive population looked like, but alas, only after the fact. In this case, we're watching it live on our telephones, and still, even though there's been a slight turn in the rhetoric, especially when on tour in appropriate places, like Macron today, claiming that this cannot go on and so on, and yet on and on it goes. Despite the jumping ship of some prominent commentators like Piers Morgan, despite the talk from the front benches in Western Europe that this has gone far enough. Even the German Premier, Merz, said he could no longer understand what Israel was seeking to do in Gaza. Well, he may not be able to understand it, but he's still arming it, and he's still criminalizing all opposition to it, bludgeoning, in fact, people on the streets, his own citizens, bludgeoned on the streets in a way that would have made the Gestapo blush for standing up against genocide in a country that was itself responsible for a genocide in the 1930s and 40s. So what's happening is that there's a lot of perambulation around the issue of a ceasefire. Will they, won't they, will they, won't they, will they join the dance? But there's no sign yet of the war coming to an end. And even if fire is ceased, all previous history shows that that fire will soon begin again, because the job is not done. The job for Netanyahu and the maniacs around him is to ethnically remove, cleanse, extirpate 2.25 million people from their own land. Now, that has run up against objective reality. No country wants to take the 2.25 million. How would you transport them? How would you force them to leave if they decided that they were going to forcibly transfer them? How and to where? There's not even a railway in Gaza that you could pack them into railway carriages like they did to the Jews in Europe in the 1940s.
Yeah, there's something a bit deceptive about the way the media jumps on. For example, the new commentary from Germany that this is appalling. So taking the required distance so you prevent more or less an uprising against the complicity in genocide. But as you said, it doesn't actually change the policy. It was same as Biden, Trump. They were both a bit appalled by the recklessness of Israel, but again, they didn't make them send one bomb less for that sake. They still participate fully. So it does feel, not being completely genuine.
Yes, well, look, if they're genuine, they're eunuchs without the balls to actually do anything about it. If they're not genuine, then they're lying to forestall, they hope, legal actions against them from their own citizens in years to come.
Well, yeah, I couldn't put it better myself. Well, the two of us, we were just both of us in Iran on a panel together as well, and this is also a conflict that strikes me as not reported properly, or at least covered. Indeed, even journalists in Europe now who wouldn't want to be in favor of a war with Iran, which would be a catastrophe on unknown dimensions, but nonetheless, there's very little the politicians speak about now that Israel is threatening to actually attack Iran, and the media coverage also a bit skewed. How do you see the possibility now of a war, and how again how is this reflected in actual what's written in the media?
Well, I don't believe that Israel could make war against Iran on its own. That would be an act of national suicide. Whether or not Iran tested a nuclear device in the desert the other day, and I think they probably did not, but whether they did or they did not, they have the ballistic superpower to destroy Israel from north to south in retaliation for any Israeli attack on Iran. And we see again today that the ragged-assed Yemeni fighters fighting in sandals with primitive weapons have yet again landed a ballistic missile right down in the middle of Ben Gurion International Airport. Israel having destroyed Yemen's international airport a couple of weeks ago. It seems that the Yemenis can land missiles on Israel with impunity and any time that they like. So if that's true of Yemen, the poorest country in the world, how much more true is it of Iran, which has tens of thousands of ballistic missiles, far more accurate and powerful than the Yemenis can possibly have. So any attack by Israel that is not backed by the United States would be an act of national suicide. And the Iranians are ready for it. It's a total misunderestimation, as George Bush would have put it, of the Iranian character to think that they are going to be cowed or in any way intimidated by the statelet on the Mediterranean of 8 million people. Iran is a country of 100 million people, almost all of them united in defense of their country and their heritage. And it would be a no contest for older readers. It would be not since Marciano's great knockouts against some horizontal chumps would there be a no contest like it. But of course, maybe despite what Donald Trump is saying, when he said just yesterday that he had warned, he used the word warned, he had warned Netanyahu against attacking Iran. Well, again, to go back to an earlier slightly rude aphorism, if that's true and Israel goes ahead nonetheless, then what kind of balls does Donald Trump have? And if it's not true, what kind of a liar is he that is pretending to be negotiating, pretending to have warned Israel, but nonetheless is in on the job and intends to make war on Iran in Israel's defense? Both of these possibilities are true. It's true possibly that this is all bluff from Netanyahu, maybe to hurry along the negotiations with the Americans, but they've had 5 rounds now and they are scheduled to have a 6th round of talks. So let's hope that that jaw rather than war is the result of all this.
Well, it takes me nicely to my last question, because you referred to the the character of Iran, that they believed that they wouldn't actually retaliate. But do Do you think the political decision makers in Washington, do they know the capabilities of Iran, and do they know the character that Iran would have the fullest intention of actually retaliating? Because it seems in the days when you opposed the Iraq war that it was and the sanctions on Iraq, that there were a lot of people in the US who seemed utterly convinced that they were, on the right side of history. They were holding them accountable. Again, you see the same now in Ukraine. It seems, some politicians insist that the Russian invasion was fully unprovoked. NATO expansion had nothing to do with what the Russians did. So again, do they believe these things, or is this ignorance or lies? I mean, it's how because if they don't know how what the capabilities of countries like Iran and how they would respond, then if we throw away the whole well-informed and rational actor assumption, then well, they can do anything essentially.
Well, I greatly respect the people of the United States and their many achievements. I have travelled widely in the country. I know the kind of can-do spirit that the country at least used to, pardon me, exemplify. But I cannot say I have much respect, excuse me, I cannot say I have much respect for their political class, neither this one or the last one or for many presidents past. There does seem to be a chronic level of under-education amongst the people around the presidents. They seem not to know things that even in shrunken Europe would be commonplace around the council table. It's inconceivable that our own leaders, at least it was in the past, would not have the evidence provided by great experts, which the United States undoubtedly has. Jeffrey Sachs, Mearsheimer, even Tucker Carlson. There are people there who know. And if the American policymakers are not taking their advice, perhaps not even considering their advice, then we really are in a dangerous place. Donald Trump seems to have no time to read. I'm not sure how much of a reader he is in any case. I'm not even sure he read his ghost-written books under his own name. But there ought to be people around him in the state, in the deep state and in the political state that do know, in fact, what the real facts of the matter are. So if they don't know that the Iranians are a united people with enormous ballistic power and the absolute will to rain down total destruction on Israel if this war starts, if they don't know that any of those countries in the Gulf from which Donald Trump returned to Washington dripping in gold and diamonds just a week or two ago, that these allies of the United States will all be completely destroyed in any all-out war between Iran and America and Israel, then we really are in a dangerous spot. Because if I know it, and I left school at 16 to go and work on a factory floor, if I know it, how come these Harvard overeducated people around Donald Trump in Washington can't know it?
I think this is a key problem these days. We have a political class armed with ideology rather than knowledge. And what's more scary than the dishonesty for me is the ignorance, that they actually do believe what they're saying, not deceiving. Then I think we're in real trouble. But
yes, and there's also the belief in exceptionalism. We're dealing here with two countries that consider themselves endowed with some God-given exceptionalism. The Israelis talk about it more often, but the American exceptionalism lies quite close to the surface in American politics, that they had some manifest destiny to exterminate scores of millions of the original inhabitants of the land they now call the USA, that they had the right, manifest destiny to bring millions of people from Africa in chains and enslave them to the fields, and that they have the manifest destiny, the exceptional divine right to be the top dog in the world. These are very dangerous traits, and to your credit, in your part of the world, nobody would, I think, openly admit to considering themselves God's chosen people or having a divine right to conquer other people. They might want to do it, they might dress it up in other words, but they wouldn't openly say it. But in the US, and of course in Israel, it is openly a part of the discourse.
I think the liberal hegemony has influenced all of Europe, though, in terms of having a almost, if not chosen by God, at least a divine purpose in terms of standing up for superior values against the inferior. But
well, yeah, Borrell, who's now changed his tune, Borrell famously said it, didn't he? He described Europe as a garden, and by extension, those trying to get into the garden as the other. He didn't say barbarian, but he meant barbarian. I didn't have the heart to tell him that in the north of Europe we don't quite regard people from Spain as truly belonging in that garden, but that's racism for you.
Yeah, either we go in, either the gardener goes in and trims the jungle, or the jungle will grow into the garden. That was Borrell's argument. Anyways, George Galloway, thank you for being so generous with your time, and I hope to see you again soon.
Pleasure. I'm sure we'll meet again soon, God willing. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks.